Hello, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson, and a very warm welcome to this very special episode. Today, we are celebrating 3 years of the podcast, 3 years of episodes that have been going out to you on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So, I want to take a moment today to go behind the mic to not only share some strategies, but also to talk about lessons learned from 3 years of the podcast. And I want to talk about those lessons that I think are really relevant to you as a leader for your everyday. And I want to share these lessons about what I've taken from it in my podcast journey, but then apply it to your world as well. But before I do, a little bit of a reflection on the journey that has brought us to this moment. So, 3 years in, we're also sharing this episode around the time of International Podcast Day on the 30th of September 2025. It's amazing to look back and to think about where we started, but also why we started as well. So, this podcast, I created this as a way to help more ambitious, talented global professionals who really wanted to develop their impact, to be able to communicate at the next level as they prepared for their leadership journey, to bring them the best of cultural intelligence skills and strategies, and helping individuals to thrive in their global careers. Now, I am very passionate about making these podcast episodes very actionable and practical. So, the topics I have been talking about over the last 3 years have been very focused on the real life questions, scenarios, situations that I come across every day in my work. I find that people who listen to this are a blend of different people. So you might be somebody who's already a leader today, you might be a future or aspiring leader, or maybe you're running your own business. It doesn't matter. The three threads that bring the podcast together: communication, culture, and confidence. This unique blend makes this podcast really different from others out there. And I know from the feedback that I receive from listeners that it is highly, highly valued for those very practical strategies, tools, ideas that I bring to this podcast. Now, this is not only about me speaking, of course, but we have guests as well. And I'm so proud to say that we have had over 40 guests on the show to date. They bring their own insights from their expert worlds, or they come from the world of corporate organizations and they share their own experiences, leadership journeys, and lessons so that you can learn from this, be inspired by it, and understand what you might need to think about as you develop your own leadership. This is, launching this podcast was not an easy journey, and clearly there's a lot that happens behind the scenes, which is really why that I was keen today to do this a little bit of a reveal of what are the journeys I've been on, the lessons I've taken from that, and how you can apply that to your own world as well. Now, before we do, I want to really share with you that this is all part of a celebration in the next few episodes around the podcast. So it's not only the third birthday, it's also International Podcast Day, and we're just about to come into our 150th episode as well. So there's a lot there. And that celebration is real. We have achieved some amazing things along this journey. So this podcast has achieved the top 5% global rank, which is amazing according to Listen Notes. We've had over 12,500 downloads since inception. And I also know from looking at the data that this is really listened to around the world In fact, the podcast has reached the top 10 rank in the careers charts in many countries across Europe, across Middle East, and beyond Asia as well. So I'm really proud of the podcast that we have here because it's doing what I set out to do, that mission of reaching more people around the world, being able to connect with more people and help more people ultimately. So, this is something which has been a really important part of the journey. But let's now get into lessons learned and how they apply to you in your leadership journey. And I want to also say that as part of this celebration, I'm going to be sharing with you a little gift to say thank you for listening, whether you've listened to one episode or you've been here all the way through the journey, every single 148 is it of these episodes. So let me wait till the end of the episode. I'll share the lessons first, and then I'll share more about how you can access that free gift. So let's come to lessons learned. The first lesson that I want to talk about is purpose, knowing your purpose. Know why you do this. So, my personal experience of this behind the mic is that I've always been very clear about what this podcast is about and what it's here to do. I've had this mission about connecting people around the world through the power of communication, cultural intelligence, and confidence. This is a driver in my work in general. And I know that the podcast and the way that it goes out through the different platforms and the video version are all part of that mission. That is all part of being able to help people more widely and globally. I wouldn't be here talking to you almost 150 episodes later if I really wasn't very clear on that purpose. So, what's the learning for you? As a leader, you need to be very clear about your personal purpose. Yes, you will have a purpose for your organization, potentially for your team, but you need to understand what it is that drives you. What is it that you're doing and why? What gets you out of bed in the morning and why do you want to achieve that? You have to be very clear about the drive that is moving you forward in that particular path in your career. And if that purpose isn't clear to you, then that makes things much more challenging. You may not have the energy to really survive the ups and downs, to be resilient no matter what comes. So I really deeply encourage you to think about this and reflect on your personal purpose. Why is it you do the work you do? Why do you want to be a leader in the way that you do it? The second area I want to talk to you about is imperfect action. This is so critical. So, behind the mic, from my own journey with creating and launching this podcast, I knew it was about imperfect action to create then a more perfect podcast. The first episode that I created for this podcast was certainly not perfect. You're very welcome to go back and have a listen or watch. But the point was, it got there. It was also quite a big effort to get to that first one. And I had to lean into quite a lot of support to make that happen, as it is there's a number of tech elements to it. It's not as simple as just hitting a record button. You have to make sure you have everything lined up and ready to go. And there was a lot of knowledge areas and gaps that I needed to fill. So, imperfect action for me was recognizing where I needed support, recognizing that I needed to create that first episode. And I even remember that first day when I created it. It was super hot. It was also lots of noise on the road out here. There was heavy traffic. There was a construction site across the road. And it was not the most perfect conditions for creating and recording my first podcast. But this is the point. You have to still go ahead and do it. You have to commit. You have to take imperfect action and then improve along the way. So, what's the learning for you on this? I think this is a really critical point for leaders. So often there is a sense of needing to know all the answers, needing to get it right, to have it perfect, so that you are seen as that strong leader. And that might be actually true for you culturally. You might have a sense that you have to represent that image to the people that you work with. But here's something I want to frame to you, is that you don't necessarily need to have everything lined up. Things don't happen unless we move forward. And if you want to wait to feel confident before you do the thing, before you move up in your career or do the challenging activity, you may be waiting a very long time. In fact, in my view, it's about said is better than perfect, and that confidence comes later. You become confident through the iteration, through doing the activity rather than beforehand. So that's the learning I want to share here. The next reflection from behind the mic is encourage conversation, don't talk. Now, this is critical. Now, I understand that you might be listening to this podcast thinking, well, I don't get the chance to respond, but you do. And this is the really interesting part, that although in theory, this is just me talking solo on this podcast episode, I really love to create conversations with you. That's why we have reflection questions that sit at the end of each episode, which are really your opportunity to reflect, to think about the learning points from the episode and apply them. You're also very much, also as part of every episode, invited to join the conversation. So I ask you to share your own experiences, to ask me your questions as a follow up to each episode. And you can do that via LinkedIn on my personal profile, Victoria Reynoldson. And that is something that I do encourage you to keep on doing. I love it when I hear from you. I love to extend the conversation. And I also love to know, by the way, what the impact of these podcast episodes are. How did you apply them? What happened? What worked for you as a result of that? That's a really energizing and exciting conversation to have. So, what's the learning for you? Well, the learning for you is very much this idea, particularly if you are a global leader where you're leading people in different places around the world, where you're working the vast majority of the time remotely. The question you've got to be asking yourself is this: how do you encourage real conversation rather than just broadcasting messages? How do you invite in questions? How do you encourage people to build on the conversation rather than to just listen to you? So, this is an important learning point. The next reflection I have for you, as from behind the mic, is thinking about how you align your energy and show up. Now, this is a topic that I find really fascinating, and I've been exploring a lot over the last months and with great success with my clients and in my work. I am a great believer in that leadership presence isn't just about putting on a coat for a period of time or copying somebody else's version of leadership. It's about understanding your unique blend of energy and the way that you project yourself and show up in the world. Part of that is really thinking about how you align that energy. And for me, behind the mic, creating these podcast episodes, I think quite hard, and I also exercise in a certain way to make sure that I'm showing up and projecting, and you can feel me even if you're just listening to my voice or watching the video version of this. And I do hope that you feel that the way that I'm projecting that energy. I don't sound flat. I don't sound boring, hopefully. I don't sound like I don't care. In fact, it's the opposite. I care deeply. And that energy is quite important to me. I know it's a key way for me to engage with you, but it's also really important for you to be able to feel me, to understand that this is a real human behind the conversation. What's the learning for you as a leader? I think this is important work, particularly as you progress your career and become more senior. How are you projecting yourself as a leader? What is the energy that you bring into the room? And how do people feel you when you're in the room? And even when you're not there, when they bring you to mind and talk about you, what's the energy that they're describing and thinking about there? The last area, my reflection from behind the mic, is about celebration and growing. The podcast clearly, when it started, was only a few episodes that I created to start off with. I didn't know how the journey was going to evolve and unfold. I had ideas, I had thoughts about where I'd like to take it, but I didn't really know whether I was going to be here creating this episode, standing here 3 years later. And I think, for me, this is really important part of recognizing that journey is a celebration, is celebrating with you and understanding that these are major milestones that have been achieved, that there are things here to really remark on and to share with the world, not to hide that. I also talk about evolving and growing because this is not a static journey. In fact, there have been lots of different ways that the podcast has changed over time, including guests coming on the show, um, having different ways of engaging with you and getting your questions in, creating blog versions of the podcast. These are all different ways that we have been evolving the podcast. And I'm very committed to continuous innovation, to continually improving, learning from others, listening to other podcasts, and understanding what we can do better here. Your feedback matters deeply to me. And that's why I'm really keen and I'm all ears to hear what you think about this podcast, what you like about it, what you enjoy, what you find most valuable, but also your ideas about how to improve. This is also really important as well. And I'm really open for that. Your feedback matters to me. And I would love it if you have enjoyed this podcast, whether it's a few episodes or one episode, or even you've listened to several of them. I'd love to invite you to share that feedback in a review on Apple Podcast. These reviews matter, they make a big difference, and it means that more people will be listening to this podcast in the future. So, what's that learning for you in your leadership? I think celebration is really critical. It doesn't matter how much is going on, it's about celebrating sometimes the small wins on that journey, but also recognizing the major milestones, reflecting how far you've come as an individual, as a collective, as an organization. As a leader, it is your job to really stop and pause the team, for everybody to recognize that journey, to celebrate it, and to create those moments of connection by recognizing that hard work, the tough times were worth it. The other half of this, the learning for you, of course, is that evolution and growth is a natural part of being a leader. There is never a moment where we say we are done. There is no more to learn. And I really am committed to that idea personally, but I really hope that you are too. And I think that's probably part of the reason why you listen to these podcasts as well. You are somebody who is committed to that evolution and growth as well. So that's it. Those are my learnings from behind the mic. I'm going to ask you some reflection questions in a minute, as I promised. But, I really want to share these as the honest insights into my own world, into my own journey with the podcast, and what I've taken out of it as leadership lessons, and how you can apply it to your world as well. Now, before I share the reflection questions, do remember as well that we have a free gift for you to celebrate the third birthday of the podcast. I'd love to share that with you, that free gift. So just message me on LinkedIn and my personal profile, Victoria Reynoldson, and I will send that to you. But let's wrap up with the questions. So the questions are, what is your greatest learning from today? What is it that you've heard me talk about as a leadership lesson that you need to apply more in your own leadership? What are the major milestones that you've got coming up in the next 6 months? And how are you going to plan to celebrate these? And how are you going to encourage more conversation with your team at work? Create that dialogue, invite questions, and get feedback. I really hope you have found this podcast episode helpful and valuable today to really take away some key leadership ideas and lessons for your own world. Thank you so much for celebrating the podcast with me. It has been such a pleasure to have you on the journey, whether you've been listening to 1, 10, 100, or all of the almost 150 episodes along the way. Your listening makes a big difference to make sure that this podcast can reach wider global audiences. And I really deeply appreciate that, you individually, even if we've never spoken. So the invitation is there. I would love to know, how do you find this episode today? What has been most valuable to you? What has been the impact when you've applied some of these leadership lessons in your own world? I would really love to know. I'd like to build that conversation. So reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know. And remember, your feedback matters deeply to me. So if you're feeling kind today, I would absolutely love for you to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and let others know what you think about this show. Thank you so much for celebrating with me, and I very much look forward to seeing you next time on the show.